All right, good afternoon, good evening, good morning to everyone who's joined our conference today. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Acronis virtual conference, always at top speed, how esports tech survives economic disruption and stays cyber fit. I am your host, Pat Hurley. I run the Americas division here for Acronis. We've got a terrific lineup of speakers set up for you today. But first, before we get into that, I know some people will probably be joining late. Others will not be able to attend due to other scheduling conflicts, and you may have other colleagues who wanted to attend but couldn't make it. The session will be recorded, so we will email you a link to the recording after the event, so you're able to share that with friends and colleagues. There are the opportunity for questions to be submitted. Please use the Q&A interface to be able to submit your questions right there. We'll try to answer as many of those as possible here at the end of the session. But we will probably not be able to get to all of them. We will also be giving away some prizes. So make sure that you stick around for the entire session because we will be giving prizes to those who maintain through the end. We've got 6 great prizes to give away at the end. Before we get officially started, I'd also like to just thank our CyberFit sports partners, our media partners for their help in promoting today's event. First off, Roush Fenway Racing, Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing, and the San Diego Padres. Thank you so much for your partnership, and we really appreciate the coordination and efforts on your side to get everything coordinated and executed quite well. As mentioned earlier, we do have some prizes for 6 lucky attendees. If you maintain through the entire session, listen to all the great content, provide some questions, we'll be able to give some hats away at the end. So without further ado, why don't we go ahead and get started here? I'll give you a really quick highlight of the agenda before we get into our keynote session, but we'll do a quick keynote followed by another keynote from a very special speaker today, a roundtable with our security experts and sports partners, followed by a Q&A and then a quick wrap up by myself at the end. So first, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker. She pre-recorded her keynote session here today. MK Ives is the Global Marketing Strategy Lead for Omen by HP. Previously, she ran partnerships for Xbox and got her start as a streamer for a top North American esports organization. Over to you, MK.
Thanks for having me, Acronis. Under normal circumstances, I'd be broadcasting from the HP offices in San Diego, but thanks to the pandemic, I'm actually coming to you from just a couple blocks away from Petco Park. Hey, Padres. I lead Omen by HP's global marketing strategy for esports and gaming influencers. While esports has been part of mainstream culture in hotspots around the globe for decades, looking at you, South Korea, what we're now witnessing worldwide is the pandemic accelerating the industry through an entire stage of growth. People are gaining so much more exposure to it. We've leapfrogged past that old idea of, oh, it's just kids playing games. Esports is growing up into mainstream entertainment. So this can be both a good thing and a danger to esports. It skipped its difficult teenage years and is now in the spotlight. Live sports is regrouping and adapting versus esports, which is already founded on a digital native experience. So the old issue of how does esports do in-person events has been flipped on its head, with live sports having to look at how do we go fully digital. So when we're thinking about esports and the future of entertainment, we can't disentangle the conversation from the larger conversation about access to high-speed internet. Whether it's fiber or 5G, high-speed internet equals digital entertainment consumption. That includes live and esports. I was watching this South African comedian recently, and he had this bit about the differences between South Africa and the US. And he said, you Americans don't understand how good your internet is here. When I come to the States for a tour, literally the first thing I do is download updates for all my devices. Your internet is so fast. When I was coming through customs last time, they asked, why are you here? And I said, for Netflix. So of course, you can't play Fortnite with your friends online if you don't have broadband. You can't have a favorite CSGO team if you can't stream their videos. So infrastructure will be a thing that determines growth. Right now, we're missing out on the opportunity to bring along almost an entire generation of both fans and players because they don't have access to the equipment and technology. So in live sports, a child like Pele, who learned to play soccer by kicking around a sock stuffed with newspapers in Brazil, could go on to become one of the most notable players of the 20th century. But esports players peak at the same time as their reflexes. They'll never improve after age 23. And they can't succeed without the digital fluency of a controller or a mouse in hand from a young age. So the digital consumer marketplace grows in a linear fashion with the availability of broadband. And I'm not even talking just exclusively about emerging markets. Internet in rural areas in the US can be just as abysmal. So for example, my father teaches biological engineering at a land-grant institution in a rural town. Now he had DSL internet until literally just a few months ago when he dug a trench and paid to have cable run out to the house. So I texted him yesterday to ask what their speeds were before getting the cable, and he responded 2.7 down by 0.5 up. And the instability was even worse than the speeds. So 5 things esports and live sports organizations can do to help their partners survive and even thrive in the next 12 months is first, listen. Figure out how your partner's needs have changed. Everyone is jockeying for different positions, so listen very closely to how each individual partner's needs have changed. You know, many standard methods of putting branding in front of fans is gone. Fans won't be going to a stadium and seeing billboards or walking past that show car in the lobby of the arena. So how can we create these new experiences? Next, if they aren't already beating down your door to talk about this, reach out and ask your partners. You can really forge stronger relationships by being the one to chase them down. Next, be flexible and evolve with their evolving needs. So in the no crowd NBA game situation we're going to be seeing, we'll see the exploration of a new fan experience through camera placements that you've never had access to before, officials and players mic'd up for the whole game. This will give viewers a new experience and in a lot of ways a new privilege of access that they've never had before. And live sports is embracing that. And we all have the opportunity to do the same for our partners. Next, tap into and use opportunities that the pandemic has presented. Players in leagues, both live and esports, now have significantly more downtime. So there is much more access to the players as personalities. We have this opportunity to rethink and reinvent the way we make content surrounding them. And then lastly, all of these teams, brands, players have their own social media followings. You can look at takeovers of social media accounts, brand accounts. You can look at a whole new level of personal interaction between the players and their fans, the drivers and their fans, that has never been possible before. So there are, in closing, many opportunities, for the people who are ready to go get them. So let's just get a little creative. Thanks everyone, and back to you, Acronis.
Thank you so much, MK. That was very good information you provided there to everybody. You want to take a quick look at the agenda here. We'll move on to another keynote before we get into the roundtable. So at this point, it is now my great pleasure to introduce a guy who's probably pretty well known among this circuit as Mr. Jim Beaver. Jim is one of our keynote speakers here today. He's a third-generation race car driver. He has done plenty in the media space in terms of his presence with online media usage. So he currently competes in off-road Premier Truck Division as a factory Polaris RZR driver. His General Tire Down and Dirty radio show as well is powered by that same company, Polaris RZR. It's America's #1 online motorsports radio show. It's broadcast on Sirius XM. It's over 200 domestic AM and FM stations, and is the U.S. military's American Forces Network as well. So Jim hosts another thing that's close to ASR, which is Project Action Podcast. It appears on many TV, radio, and print online outlets, as well as actively competing in and covering racing events. With a roster of over 15 pro sim racers, Jim Beaver esports field teams in 5 different world championships and hosts some of the biggest sim racing events in the world. Over to you, Jim.
Really humbling to be here. I'm looking at some of the guests that we've got today, and it's really fortunate here to be able to to be one of the keynote speakers, with some of the best in North American motorsports, on this panel. But thanks for kind of telling a little bit about my background. Obviously, I'm a racer myself. Do radio and TV work. I've got my own media company, and most importantly today, I am a esports team owner. And I guess to get to the part where we talk about esports, I want to kind of dive back into my background and kind of how I've got to where I'm at, because that kind of brings us to the present with esports. And really, things started out with me as a struggling race car driver. I really, struggled to find funding, running a trophy truck. I had one in the garage, and what they don't tell you when you have a trophy truck is, the $250,000 to $700,000 you spend on a trophy truck. That is the cheapest thing you will ever do. It's running the truck and throwing $100 bills out the window that really actually, is what's the most expensive part. So, that being said, I started looking at opportunities and some of the opportunities in the marketplace, and I was fortunate that early 2000s or 2010s, I was a guest on a radio show, and my partners all said, man, we got a lot of value from that, so I started looking at opportunities, which is going to bring us to kind of, I guess, the basis of what we're going to talk about today. And there's 2 things I want you to take away from this. One is the adapt or die mentality, because if we're not adapting as brands, as racers, as companies, eventually, things are going to dry up and we're going to die. And it's diversifying. It's having our eggs in a lot of different baskets. And I think as you will see throughout this is, that's really, what brings us to esports and this emerging market. We can't rest on what we did 5 years ago. We can't rest on what we did 3 years ago, or even last year. I mean, it's all irrelevant, as we've seen this year. I mean, last year, it seems like an eternity ago with, this pandemic going on. So we always have to be looking forward and searching for the next big thing. And, the way we do that and finding those next big things is we've got to plant a lot of seeds and see what grows roots. And me, myself, I invest in a lot of different places. I don't advertise a lot of them. And, you got to see what springs up. And it's not always going to be a home run. I mean, how many of you have invested in failed social media platforms? I mean, I'm guilty. MySpace, anybody? I know what was Periscope a couple years ago. That was supposed to be the next big thing, and it never grew roots. Right now, there's a new one called Parler out. I've got a Parler account, set that up a couple of weeks ago, and I don't know if it's going to take off, but, a year from now, maybe it's going to reap dividends, and if it doesn't, well, it's just something we shut down and move on to the next thing, right? I mean, I think a lot of us probably wishes 2 years ago we would have invested in TikTok. I know I'm struggling to get a TikTok following now because, it was something I passed off and really didn't see value in, and it all of a sudden becomes a big thing. So, with all that being said, I mean, I saw esports really 2 years ago as something that could take off. And I know, listening to MK talk, and I completely agree with her, we've skipped an entire generation. I saw this as something 2 years ago I wanted to invest in, hoping that 5 years from now it would pay dividends. Little did I know that this global pandemic would happen, and it would have been the best business decision I'd ever make, a year and a half ago. And, things have accelerated so fast in esports. We've gone from an emerging market to a market that's here today and ready for investment. I'm going to talk a lot about sim racing today and e-racing, but it really factors into the whole esports ecosystem as a whole. And I think when we're talking specifically about e-racing, we've got to understand that it's an emerging market within this bigger market. You want to talk about League of Legends and Fortnite, and I think some of our panelists will probably jump into some of that later on. But you hear about these $3.5 million paydays that these teenage kids are getting, and you hear about the Twitch and the YouTube streamers making millions of dollars off of every video and things like that. And what we're going to talk about today in the sim racing and the e-racing side of things, it's not quite there yet. We don't have that mainstream appeal, but the pandemic has put us in front of the mainstream, and now we're starting to get that investment because, you know, a lot of these, you know, these YouTube streams and things like that and the events that were going on, all of a sudden, you know, a couple of years, you know, a couple months later, they're on NBC Sports, they're on Fox. So now all of a sudden esports is in front of the masses, you know, and it goes along, you know, and it goes along with, you know, what I'd said earlier, having your eggs in multiple baskets, right? A lot of us wishes, you know, 3, 4, 5 months ago that we could have had our eggs in, you know, the esports basket. And, you know, most of us panelists here today, you know, did, and we're very fortunate. But, you know, next it's how, you know, how can you get involved? And, you know, what can you do to get involved in esports and help grow your business or grow your personal brand and take it to the next level through esports? Because, you know, the time right now, it is the time to get in. If you do it a year from now, 2 years from now, you're going to be struggling to get a foothold. You know, and I think the biggest thing that I've learned through all of this is consumption, how people consume media. Obviously, esports and sim racing has been on TV now, but really our, you know, our core audience is still those young up and coming gamers, and it's you know, it's the new generation that consumes on YouTube, they consume on Twitch, you know, they have TikTok accounts, things like that. You know, I think that's what the future is with esports. But us as business people, you know, we've got a lot of opportunities that we can, you know, get involved in, and you know, there's a lot of opportunities for growth. And I think, you know, we see the big events going on, and I've been fortunate to put on a few events during the pandemic that drew viral type numbers. You know, and it's easy to get involved with events and with team partnerships. But I think there's more there, you know, that we can do because this is still such an emerging market. One of the biggest things that I have learned through my team is data acquisition and data analysis. And I think a lot of people don't realize that for a professional esports team, the amount of data that we gather with our setups for our cars and, you know, and with, you know, the Motec systems that we run to gather this data, there's so much transfer with setups and things like that that go back and forth. And I think there's a better way, and we haven't quite found it yet. I know my team is working on it. We've talked with our, you know, technical partners at Acronis on some ideas, but I think there's a lot of opportunities for brands to get involved with the data side of esports that hasn't been done yet. And I think another big thing is the technology in sim rigs. You know, you see these drivers and they've got these multiple screens. They've got 3 or 4 screens, you know, in front of them, and they're sitting in these race car seats. And, you know, the steering wheel technology, the shifter technology, it's slowly kind of grown. But I think there's a lot more there because you sit in a real race car, and as much as it's close, it's not exactly quite there yet. So I think there's still a lot, you know, in regards to technology in sim rigs that we can do to help, you know, e-racing along. And I guess finally, you know, one of the biggest opportunities I think that there is in e-racing is marketing and promotion. We've been doing things a traditional way in major motorsports, and I think that's been one of the biggest problems is our failure to adapt and to see emerging markets. Now we're starting to invest a little bit in Twitch and YouTube and video content and social and digital, but you've seen the major players in motorsports, you know, struggle to adapt until recently, and you've seen some of their viewership go downhill, and it's because you know, they've been doing their marketing and promotion in one set way. And then on the flip side, you've got esports, where, you know, this is all digital, and it's Twitch and it's YouTube and, you know, and it's social media, and, you know, esports has done things one other way. And I think there's a hybrid that really needs to happen. And we're at that point where we're starting to get this mainstream recognition. We've got this merger of these different communities. We've got the mainstream audience. We've got the niche audience. We've got digital. We've got real world. We've got digital events. We've got on-site events. And I think the biggest thing that we've got and the biggest opportunity that we've got moving forward in esports is really putting together marketing and promotional packages that bridge the gaps between the two, the digital world and the real world, and traditional marketing and this new generation of marketing. And I think that's one of the biggest opportunities that we have as, you know, as not only business people, as esports team owners, you know, or possible esports players, is really finding the happy medium between the two. And I think once we do, that's really what's going to take e-racing and esports in general to the next level. But thank you guys for the opportunity to speak. I think this is one of those things where I could speak on for 20, 30 minutes, but I know we've got some amazing panelists lined up to answer your questions. So I'm going to send it back over to you, Pat.
Thanks so much, Jim. That was fantastic. A lot of information, a lot to digest there. It's just amazing how fast this area is growing. And the interesting part to me is really you're seeing a lot of the mainstream sports starting to adopt this type of stuff. So fantastic stuff. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll take a quick look at the agenda here, but at this point, we're going to move into our roundtable. We're going to go after some heavy hitters in the industry, some of our partners here. I'll do a quick introduction for you guys. You'll see some faces up here. You're probably familiar with most of these guys. Obviously, you're familiar with the brands that they represent. But Jackson Martin is the general manager of esports for Roush Racing. He's responsible for the integration of traditional and digital media strategies to develop the team's influence and deliver value to its partners. He's also the architect of Roush's 2 esports teams on the NASCAR Heat and the iRacing Syndicate, with the latter winning its first championship in 2019. Congratulations on that, Jackson. Brett Laudenbach is the president of NRG ESPORTS, including esports teams, the San Francisco Shock and the Chicago Huntsmen. He oversees the day-to-day operations and long-term planning of sportsmanship, sponsorships, and gaming. Prior to that role, Brett worked as an agent at Endeavor, where he worked with tournament organizers and advised brands, including T-Mobile, Bud Light, and Visa on their investments into the esports space. Moving on to Mike Milanoff. He's the COO for Team Liquid, overseeing partnerships and competitive operations, original content production, and new business, with the aim of increasing the team's footprint in the esports industry. He has experience in video production, influencer management, sales, and online streaming, including a 7-year career as a professional World of Warcraft player. And Tom German is the technical director of Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing, building on 2 decades of working in motorsports. He has held the top technical position at the 2 IndyCar and 2 NASCAR teams, helping deliver 4 championships. Count them, 4 championships and 5 Indianapolis 500 wins. Rounding out the panel, we've got Candid West. He's the VP of Cyber Protection Research here at Acronis, and he'll be leading out the panel, obviously with some deep expertise on the security side of things. So with that, we gave the introductions. Let's move on to our first question here. Business impact of the pandemic. So this is a really big number, $5.45 billion, the projected 2020 losses by the NBA, NHL, and MLS, and Major League Baseball in fan spending and national TV revenue due to the pandemic. Per ESPN, May 2020 is where that data came from. So we'll start maybe with Jackson. What was the biggest lesson learned from the pandemic for you and Roush Racing?
Absolutely. So I think for us, it was that you can't view this as a challenge. You have to view it as an opportunity. It's a chance to be agile. It's a chance to build on what you know you're already good at, but look to new platforms. I was really proud of NASCAR as an industry came together to put on the NASCAR Pro Invitational Series, where we had real-world drivers racing on the iRacing platform. And we put it together. There were 7 different races. It drew 7 million viewers on Fox and FS1. And it was us looking to integrate with our partners. It was us developing something new, but with assets that we had and we knew were strong, and that's the driver personalities. And it paid off huge dividends for us. 1.7 million of those TV viewers had never watched a NASCAR race before. So by looking to this, by expanding what we do, we were able to engage a new audience while also holding true to our own identity. And so for us, that was the biggest thing, is looking at how to be creative, but stay within our own boundaries.
Thank you, Jackson. Tom, was it a similar experience for you guys at Rahal Letterman Lanigan?
I think, yeah, very similar. So I think we experienced some of the same links to the esports world that Jackson's referring to. And like us, like he mentioned, it's a new demographic that we're able to expand into. And I think that's a great opportunity for us. And really, by comparison, it's a great time to be in motorsports. We can social distance and compete at the same time, which is really why we're, first back to the live competition. For us, maybe the biggest lesson learned is really more about systems thinking. The pandemic reminded everybody about how interconnected we all are, how dependent we all are on each other. And it's really what competition is. We're all interacting with each other and rising to the challenge and seeing what we can do to exploit those interactions and really make a difference in competition. So basically, I think that the thing for us is we try to build a competitive advantage through managing these complex systems. and the ability to make a small adjustment to a aerodynamic adjustment, a tire adjustment, something, so small, it makes a complete impact on the overall result is biggest thing we've taken away from the pandemic. Just a little refresher on how interconnected everything is and how important it is to look at the whole system.
Yeah, really allows you to step back, I guess, and understand this new normal. Brett, any thoughts on this question? You want to contribute to this part of the panel?
Yeah, definitely. I think, for us in the esports world, this was supposed to be a very different year. For us as a team organization, we were going to be hosting our first big live events with our Overwatch team, the San Francisco Shock, and with our Call of Duty team, the Chicago Huntsmen. And, going into March, we had sold out about 9,000 tickets weekend in Chicago at the Wintrust Arena for Call of Duty. And suddenly to have to refund all those tickets, cancel the event, try and figure out how to maneuver sponsorships that were originally a live event, component into a digital format was a huge undertaking for us, and was really thankful for the partners that we've been able to bring on who were ready to adapt and understand that this is just a totally unprecedented time, and to look at it and say, cool, there's really still an awesome, authentic way to reach our fan base, to reach our audience and connect with our fans in a pretty meaningful way digitally, and moving all those events to that online format and really kind of digging into what else we can be doing that we weren't doing before digitally.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it certainly brings more viewers probably in that were probably more familiar with the traditional stick and ball type sports to get more, to get visibility to the esports space. And, for me personally, it was something I didn't realize was so big until I started to learn more about it. Mike, how was this for you guys? What was your biggest learning from the pandemic?
Mine's a bit of a positive answer. Thanks for having me, Pat and Acronis team. For us, we had to learn how to respond to the level of interest from advertisers. So it's kind of a positive answer. Like I said, the leagues that are listed here, our ownership group operates stadiums and franchises in them. And not only did advertisers from TV or linear call us right away, but also our investors called us and said, hey, we want to double down. What more can you do? This is the time where everybody is craving content. Everybody is discovering your industry. And so we have a one-of-a-kind relationship with Twitch on the sales side. And I think that really helped us respond to the amount of interest into our professional athletes and in activating with Team Liquid, doing digital events together, and exploring this new age of digital and the digital footprint that you need to have in entertainment today, whether it's gaming or traditional sports or esports, whether it's niche or not. And so our biggest lesson was malleability and staying agile and working a lot of hours. And what does that do to an organization? How can you make sure that it's running smoothly? And that's what we focused on.
Excellent. That's great feedback. I think it's a good opportunity to actually transition to our next question. There is a prediction that there will be losses related directly to esports. So pandemic revenue impact on esports projected to be just under 100 million. 2020 revenue losses, including merchandising, tickets, media rights, sponsorships, et cetera. Many events being canceled, as Brett alluded to, postponed or moved due to the pandemic. How should sports and esports sponsors be adjusting their strategies for the post-pandemic world? How can we help them thrive there? Maybe Brett, we'll start with you to address this from your side.
Yeah, definitely. I think, the way we look at it is, beyond just being a sports team in the esports world, we're very much a media company. And a lot of that had to do with us shooting content with our players in person, live. And now we've had to transition that whole model for our current sponsors, for new sponsors. And I think the super interesting thing to me working in the partnership landscape has been, while we've lost this opportunity for these live events, while we know we're not going to have massive merchandise numbers from in-person sales, what we have been able to see is a lot of brands coming back and saying, hey, I was supposed to activate with March Madness this year. I was supposed to activate in this sporting event. And I don't know how to reach 18 to 34-year-old guys at home right now, other than through gaming, other than through kind of this online experience that esports brings. And that's been hugely valuable to us. I think we've looked at it and said we're going to continue to double down on content that's able to be produced remotely, pretty cost effectively. You don't need massive studios to pull off a lot of this stuff. Sometimes it's as simple as Zoom calls and video conferences and screen shares. And you can create content that really resonates with people. We just announced a player signing last week. Around Fortnite, we brought in Shaq to help announce us, who's one of our investors here. And the stream for the announcement ended up hitting up to around 200,000 concurrent viewers, huge engagement on social, and a ton of earned media just across different outlets. And so it's like, normally we'd try to find a way to bring all those people together in person, but now we're strategizing, thinking about it, and finding a way to insert our partners into those conversations.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, Shaquille O'Neal's a big draw, big personality, big guy. So he's out there. He's all over the place. Jackson, what was the experience like for you at Roush Fenway Racing?
Yeah, so really it hyper accelerated what we already try and do here, which is where on our marketing side, we try and think of ourselves as an agency within a race team. And so we're constantly going to our partners with new ways to develop content, new ways to integrate them into that content. You know, like MK alluded to in the keynote, we're trying to beat down their doors with new ideas. We always are. And so how are we integrating them into what we're doing with this? So, you know, I talked about the iRacing Pro Invitational was a huge success, but we're able to get all of our partners on board, get them some TV time, keep them rolling during the pandemic. But we're also able to do some cool things. NASCAR or iRacing scanned a track that NASCAR hasn't raced at since 1996. And so people were thrilled to see that. We were able to bring back one of our legendary drivers to race for the team for the first time in 5 years. And we kept one of our current partners on the car. So we were integrating them. We're looking to just find ways to continue to keep them in the content cycle, to continue to provide them with anything that we can to keep them top of mind for our fans, even when there may not be cars on the racetrack. And to that end, we're also, into active esports competitions with iRacing and NASCAR Heat, both of which are approaching 3 million live views for the year. And so activating with our partners around those races, in addition to the races that they've signed up for on the track, has been hugely valuable for us.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, even though these events are canceled, the very large live events, I know we're seeing a new normal in terms of the actual attendance, what it's going to look like. These organizations still need to be protected. Candid, maybe you can chime in here. I know you've talked with some of the teams about their addressing cyber threats. Is there anything you've seen during the pandemic that you're seeing them do differently?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely see that there is a lot of interest, right? As we learned, a lot of the players kind of gather new crowds, maybe from live sport events or kind of traditional sporting events, which are now moved online, which means there is a lot of money involved. And unfortunately, as always, as soon as there is money involved, of course, cyber criminals try to get their piece of the cake as well. So we've seen more phishing attacks also towards kind of credential stealing for the online accounts of esports. So there's definitely a lot more going on, and we can dive into more details later. But I think it's still, as the Mike and the others alluded, it's time for opportunities at the moment. Jim mentioned there's a lot of change going on, right? You always have to be agile and kind of invent yourself new. And now there is a huge demand. So it's actually perfect to do it. Like we've seen with physical sports, which had those cardboard cutouts that you can buy and then place inside the stadium. So you're kind of virtually there. And all those new ideas, of course, some of those exist also in esports. And it's now a great opportunity to go for it. But yeah, as you say, there's a lot of data involved that needs to be protected, as unfortunately the bad guys are there as well.
Yeah, I think one of the funnier things I saw was, I believe it was in Tokyo, they brought a bunch of stuffed animals into the baseball games and had them behind home plate there with, it was a new and interesting type of crowd. Mike, anything additional to add here? I know we kind of transitioned to this topic from your response to the first question, but anything to add?
Yeah, sure. I think definitely our apparel sales are slightly down. We're not in the business of tickets like some of the tournament organizers, and NRG is a little bit of a different team than Team Liquid, but our media rights and sponsorships, if you include influencer marketing, are up by about 20%. I think the advice that I would give to just stay focused on the question is don't assume any format for content, for promotion, for social media being relevant anymore. And also, if you're ever copying another brand, don't do it. Find your own way to bring value, not to your partner, but to your partner's fans. So an example I could give is, since we're invested into by many NBA properties and sports franchises, many of those players reached out through our investors to Team Liquid, and they said, hey, we don't have a gaming computer at home and we don't know how to set up Twitch. And we said, well, let us involve our partner Alienware and our partner Twitch and teach you how to stream from home, right? Like teach you what setup that you need. And then, like you guys mentioned before, Shaq has a great reach, so do these other guys and gals. And my advice is around, don't assume what has worked in the last 10, 20 years will work going forward. Please keep innovating on content formats, but most importantly, value propositions for not your partner, but for their fans.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great feedback. Why don't we move on to question number 3? Tom, maybe we'll kick it to you for this one. Talking about the future, how are we going forward out of this situation? I don't think anybody has the answer as to when things are going to be back to, what normal looked like in maybe December or January, but 1.6 billion projected esports annual worldwide revenue by 2023, mostly from sponsorships and ad revenue, rest from media rights, publisher fees, merchandising, etc. How do you envision your approach, Tom, for your business, marketing and tech strategy evolving in the new normal, in the post-pandemic world?
Yeah, thanks for the question. When the pandemic hit, we didn't even have an esports program, so we're really jumped in and swimming hard here to catch up. And the pandemic really accelerated that process. From a competition perspective, kind of like Jim alluded to in his opening comments, is we see the driver in the loop simulation that we use on a regular basis in the deep technical world really starting to merge with the gaming e-racing world. And those links are, there's a tremendous amount of overlap. Like you mentioned, there's a scanning of the tracks, there's the basic physics models of the cars. All this overlaps, but it's still quite different. As Jim mentioned, it's not quite there where we can use it for racing or preparation for the live events, but it's good. It has a lot of potential, and trying to find that business model that unlocks that full potential is really one of our focus. And then really on the business side, we're more focused on the customizing the digital experience. We're trying to reach back with our partners, our fans, further earlier in the process, so that we're leading them into the event and through the event with a customized experience, a personalized experience for each of those stakeholders. And that really includes esports personalities. It includes esports events, as well as more straight digital type events. So it's really broad-based is our focus right now.
Okay. Jackson, how have you guys changed your future-looking strategy post-pandemic?
Yeah, certainly. One of the appeals of NASCAR has always been how close you can get to the drivers, the cars, how much access there is for fans to everything that's going on with the competition. So for us, the thinking is, how are we creating more access when there's less access? And that really does rely on an engagement with the digital side of things, our content creation process, how we're utilizing the personalities that exist on our team, because it extends beyond just the 2 drivers that are suiting up. So how are we creating comprehensive experiences for fans with the assets that we already have and what's within reach for us to develop? So really, it's just trying to be as forward-thinking as we can with what we can create in-house, but also extending to industry partners, and how we can look to still create those emotional touch points that have really driven the sport for the last 60 years, even in a post-pandemic world.
Yeah, certainly getting creative. And Mike, you kind of hit on this in your response to the last question, but is there anything additional that Team Liquid's looking at to kind of change the forward-looking approach? to this new
Absolutely.
world?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that our business strategy is evolving daily. I think a famous investor quote on our site is 2 weeks in the NBA is one day at Team Liquid, right? And we're continuing evolving, but looking to our partners at this time, but also being careful which partners we're bringing on. Since there is all of that inbound, we want to be careful who we partner with. Everything that we do is very strategic and calculated, and we feel very good about the partners and the conversations that we're having today going into 2021 and beyond.
Excellent. Brett, you already mentioned the leveraging of some big personalities. Is there anything you guys are adding to your strategy, looking out 2, 3, 4 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, one of the big shifts, obviously, that has kind of come on from this whole COVID situation is obviously everyone's stuck at home. People are much more inclined to be on their computer, much easier to reach in some sense from a digital content perspective and a digital product perspective. The issue is everyone knows that. And so there's just a lot of noise out there, and you really have to find ways to cut through that noise. And so what we've found is really kind of pivoting a lot of certain things that we would do that might be VOD, that might be watch anytime, that might just be kind of passive out there. We're really trying to build, I think, event moments around them, whether or not it's live shows we've created as pre-shows for some of our matches, live events, live premiering of content through partnerships at YouTube. All that stuff has been very, very valuable to us. And I think we're going to continue on with that well beyond the COVID situation, well beyond the pandemic situation, because we found it's a really great way to engage our fan base and a really great community building tool, which is really what we're about. We're trying to bring in as many fans to this NRG kind of big tent, whether or not it's through Fortnite or Overwatch or Call of Duty, to really kind of share in the communal gaming experience.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, for Acronis, I can speak to it. We've got a bunch of panelists here that probably a year ago we might not have been having a session like this, right? So we've adapted our approaches and gotten deeper and broader with our partners to get different messages out and tell good stories. And obviously, it's a very crowded virtual arena now to get FaceTime with your customers, your partners, et cetera. So it certainly requires creative thinking. We'll move on to our next question here. And Candid, I think it's probably best suited for you to kick us off here. Cybersecurity and esports, ransomware, credential theft, illegal cheats, top forecast cybersecurity threats to pro esports players per Trend Micro in October 2019. What cyber risk exposures worry you and how are you addressing them? How are you helping these teams to address them?
Yeah, I mean, we already mentioned there is, of course, a lot of attack space as well. And I would say account theft or account takeover is definitely one to consider. Luckily, a lot has changed in the esports arenas as well. So I'd say 10 years ago with World of Warcraft, it was still quite easy that once someone stole your account, that they could just resell all the virtual currencies, all your goods, and you would literally wake up with a naked character. With modern games, it's no longer as easy, but there's still a lot of shenanigans that you can do, down to even getting that account banned, right? Which definitely is a nightmare for a lot of players because they invested a lot of time. So making sure that your account is protected, which means having a strong password, wherever possible, use multi-factor authentication is definitely a must. Because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is just not a good password. Neither for your email, but definitely also not for your online accounts for eSport, right? And then I'd say for any online event, being it for the attendee, but also for the organizer, it's always a kind of a horror scenario, a nightmare to have a denial of service attack. So a distributed denial of service attack, which just floods the servers with just data garbage, bringing it down to its knees. And MK already alluded, a lot of players or even organizations might not have that fiber connection, which can actually sustain a lot of those attacks, right? And the problem is denial of service attacks are so cheap at the moment. You can buy for less than $10 a 1-hour denial of service attack, which will at least keep a few players offline. And I mean, I'm not enticing and encouraging anyone to do it, just saying it's unfortunately quite cheap. And some of you might still remember the Mirai botnet about 4 years ago. They generated a 1.2 terabyte per second stream of data, which actually took down PayPal, Twitter, Netflix, and a few others. So if that's something which is out there and they use IoT devices like cameras, then that's something that you have to factor in, right? And there's probably more, I mean, cheats, right? It's getting more and more into sophisticated cheating engines. And I'm not just talking about aiming bots for Call of Duty, but we have seen some hardware assisted cheats, which use a secondary computer to read out the memory, to do some calculations, which is getting very difficult to detect for normal games, right? So a lot of the arenas started to kind of use their own equipment there to kind of check that nothing else happens on those machines. So you have to kind of have a security solution actually monitoring the behavior on the systems as well. And of course, last but not least, Jim mentioned already, specifically in sim racing, there's a lot of data being generated from all the telemetry, sensors, and so on. So if someone's managed to get their hands on that data, that's already bad. But if they manage to actually delete the data, and maybe even held it hostage against you, as in classical ransomware, then that might be a big concern as well. Because if you're running blind, or in that case, driving blind, it's not going to help you win, right? So lots of things, there are technologies that can help you, but unfortunately, we still see with esports that lots of the gamers say, hey, I don't want to slow down my machine, so I'm not installing anything. And that is definitely the wrong aspect. So make sure that you configure it correctly, so it's not slowing down your machine, but you definitely should protect yourself.
All great points, Candid. Thank you. Jackson, maybe you can talk about some of the technological things you guys are doing to address these threats.
Yeah, certainly, you know, our biggest fear there, especially as Jim touched on, is the data collection, being able to protect that. Particularly in iRacing and NASCAR heat, our drivers are spending so much time working on their setups and gathering all that telemetry data, everything to, you know, most aggressively attack the track. And how do we protect that? How do we support them? And really engaging our partners like Acronis, who do have a really good understanding of what the landscape looks like, what we can be doing to proactively, you know, manage those threats. Just looking to the industry experts like those that we have relationships with. For me, my most recent experience with, you know, esports cheating is sticking a Game Shark memory card in my PS2 and unlocking a lot of Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 characters. So really relying on the people that have a better understanding of the current landscape and how we can best leverage that to protect our own players.
Absolutely. All great points. Mike, anything to add? This is obviously top of mind for Team Liquid as well.
Absolutely. We just want to remain an industry leader, and we feel personally responsible of the security around all of our athletes, their digital media properties, but also other accounts like Candid mentioned. And we are continuing to find ways to stay ahead of the curve in addressing these issues. We did have a cyber risk exposure last year that we dealt with pretty swiftly. And so this is definitely not a fabricated issue.
Yeah, it's not just noise. These things are really happening. It's not just media blowing it up. These things happen every day. Why don't we move on? Just reminding the attendees that we've got here, we do have a Q&A. We've received a few questions already. We'll try to address all of them, or as many as we can by the end. But do want to get to our last question here, number 5, about innovation in sports and esports. 70% is the proportion of communication services that say their future 5G plans are centered on esports. Where are you looking for business, marketing, and tech innovation? What emerging tech are you exploring? Brett, what are you doing at NRG Sports to leverage the power of 5G in the future?
Yeah, I think for us, it's very excited about 5G. You know, our CEO, Andy Miller, comes from a mobile background, specifically mobile ad tech, working eventually with Steve Jobs at Apple, helping launch iAd there. And so it's definitely, mobile has been a really big key area for us to keep an eye on. And just the explosion of the mobile market in esports has been really great to see. I know Liquid has some great mobile teams over there with CRL. We're really excited about the mobile offering around Call of Duty. We just think that, you know, it's the most democratized form of gaming out there. Everyone has a phone. Doesn't matter which country you're in, where you're from. Every spectrum of kind of socioeconomic background, everyone has a phone. So it's probably their best route into the biggest fan base we can possibly get. I think for us, really keeping an eye on that, keeping an eye on the developers who are focusing in that area and finding ways to get in there and add value where we can without just trying to extract a fan base is really key and core to us.
Excellent. Tom, from an IndyCar perspective, how are you guys looking at 5G and what other emerging tech are you guys exploring there?
I think the key emerging tech for us really is the management and interrogation of data, both in the esports and the sports world. On the sports world, we're collecting over 1,000 channels, streaming directly to the car, real time throughout practice, the race, qualifying. In the esports world, as Jim mentioned, there's hundreds of channels coming to us there and data and information, and we have to make information. We have to process that information, digest it, visualize it, and make a decision in literally seconds. And the technology to bring all that together and sort through the noise to find the true gains, which are very small in all these arenas. Everybody's very, very good. So finding that advantage, you're looking for a very small part of a very large, complex system. So the technology to do that is really where we see the key. Additionally, I think there's a lot of very areas that are not well understood. Racing's been around since the automobile's been around, yet nobody really knows what makes a great race. There's a lot of opinions and ideas, but what truly makes a great race, and AI may be the answer there. It may provide some insights there that none of us have ever realized, and really helps us build a better product for everybody, for the fans, for the sponsors, for ourselves.
Excellent. Yeah. Jackson, anything outside of 5G that you guys are looking at Roush Fenway?
Really, from my team's perspective, it's looking at how we can take everything that's going on in this race and best transmit it to the fans. It's what I was talking about earlier about providing access when there isn't access. How can we transmit all of this data coming off the car? How can we show fans what's really happening to the race car as it's going through the turns? I think, people who watch the sport understand that NASCAR isn't just, 200-mile-an-hour billboards turning left. There's a lot more to it than that. So how do we take that? How do we show people, these are the forces going on in the car. Here's how much wheel Ryan Newman's putting into it when he's trying to go around turn 3 at Indy. How do we show people all of the nuances that are involved in the sport? I think that that's really important to us, but also utilizing some of this, enhanced virtual technology for training purposes. Our drivers use iRacing. As Tom said, it might not be perfect, but it does allow you to gain more experience on tracks, to get laps. But even beyond drivers, how do we look at the data going through on iRacing? How can our crew chiefs and engineers better understand what they can be doing to try new things on the car, to understand what's happening? We're looking at all of these types of things and how we can just best use what's there to move our product forward, both on the fan engagement side as well as the competition side.
Yeah, and I think Tom was the first to reference the AI piece of it. Maybe I'll pivot over to Candid to a quick response here. But AI creeping into more and more of the strategic, approaches of not just teams but corporations and stuff like that. Are you seeing AI being a more critical part of a robust security protection scheme?
Absolutely. I mean, the advances in machine learning and artificial intelligence can be applied to so many different things, right? To the security space, to racing with a lot of data, as Tom said as well, healthcare and so on. And it's getting better and better. So it's definitely something that you have to look out for, that it can use to find those needle in the haystacks, right? Which for security means you can find the cheaters and kind of eliminate those. For the race organizer, of course, kind of fine-tuning your race car and making sure that you will have that edge for the next race. So definitely something to look into.
Excellent. Well, we're going to give each of you guys the opportunity to provide some tips here. Martin, we got you, Jackson, we got you here as the first person here. You want to expound on your tip here?
Absolutely. For me, it's always about looking forward and anticipating challenges, but anticipating opportunities too, making sure that you're in the best position to set yourself up for success in the future and be adaptive, be able to move to where you need to be, being able to leverage your resources to something that you might not even be thinking of, but having that ability, I think, is so important.
Okay. Brett, pretty simple statement, be proactive. So what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think it pretty much applies to everything we do here at NRG, whether or not it's proactively talking to our players about security and the importance there. I think, the number one area you're going to run into issues before anything else is a player giving out private information, doing something stupid like setting their password to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and just being proactive and educational with them on the upfront the first day they're in the door before they even sign a contract is hugely important to us. Same with our staff. And we take that across everything we do, from how we recruit players to how we build teams to how we build partnerships.
Excellent. Mike, you're hitting on innovation again, security and innovation. You want to give some more details here on your tip?
Yeah, I mean, I think we are exploring a lot of new technologies and ways to stay secure and not thinking like an esports organization or like a digital franchise, and trying to learn as much from, industries like NASCAR or others like Acronis. So I think we're all saying the same thing here: stay ahead of the curve, stay proactive, right? Don't look in the rear view mirror, which was a great tribute there to your sport. But that's where my tip stems from.
Excellent. Tom, it's, you say the same thing about innovating, but it's also that we're not, the technology providers and the teams are not just the ones innovating. You have to stay ahead of the innovation of the bad guys out there.
Yeah, these guys are serious, and they're always changing. Whether it's an individual or it's a state actor. I mean, they're well sourced. They're serious, and I think sourcing. What we've been impressed with the Acronis so far is the dynamic and frequency of the changes. They're always working on something new, always introducing a new feature, always looking at new ways of doing things. And these are the types of people we want to be involved with for our cybersecurity, because our standard mode is static. We like to have things that work every time, things that are safe, things that are well understood and easy, but that's just not the way you need to attack this problem. We need people that can change and innovate and change and keep changing, because the people that are attacking us are, doing the same.
Excellent. Well, one of the guys that's pushing to drive that innovation is Candid. He wants to talk about his tip as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm absolutely agreeing with all the other tips there. Looking ahead is always good. Maybe more kind of tangible and concrete here, I would highlight the protect your account. And yes, it's not just the gaming account, it's all your social media accounts, everything, right? Because everything could be misused against you. So making sure that you're not falling for phishing, for malware, and as I said, two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication definitely can help against any of those attacks. And the second point is making sure that your device, your data is actually available to you when you need it. And that means that, yes, you need to be aware of denial of service attacks and kind of plan ahead, maybe have the contact ready to know who to call to kind of mitigate it as good as possible. And of course, if someone tries to delete your data, making sure that you have a backup, kind of a disaster recovery plan, because otherwise, if that data is gone, you're gone from the race as well. So don't let the bad guys kick you out of the game.
Exactly. Very good. Well, we've got a bunch of questions here from the Q&A chat, so we'll try to get through a few of these. I'm not sure exactly how much time we have left, but we'll try to hammer out a bunch of these. A lot of questions about security and staying safe. Candid, why don't I lob this first one over to you? Have you noticed an increase in hackers going after esports and online gaming athletes?
Yes, we unfortunately have. As I said, money is involved, and that kind of attracts the bad guys, which seems to be a logic step. So we see a lot of attackers going after the accounts, mainly phishing attacks and malware like keyloggers, stealing your accounts locally, and then those accounts are resold. It's hard to quantify how much increase we saw, because a lot of those attacks actually never get reported, and probably a lot of them just are, well, not really into the mood in disclosing that they have clicked on one of those emails. So definitely increasing, and I don't see any stop from that. So make sure that you have security in place to not fall victim.
Okay. This one is directed at Mike. Is Team Liquid just a sports franchise with professional players, or what does your business look like today?
Great question. Yeah, Team Liquid actually started 20 years ago as a website before there was Twitter and before there was Reddit. And we were a community destination, teamliquid.net, to discuss esports. Like MK, I've said, it was only active in Korea in the very early days, right? But there's nowhere to talk about it. And so we've kept that business and we've really expanded it. So we have a large online properties and tech business now, a website network with 350 million hits per month, which is quite substantial. Also on the mobile side, there's some really cool products coming. And we've really looked at what does the business of esports look like and what can we build supplementally to the sports franchises, right? So we essentially currently run 17 versions of Team Liquid in 17 different sports. Imagine if the Golden State Warriors could also be in hockey and have a tennis player and also be in European soccer, right? For example. So within those 17 sports, we are Team Liquid, but like Brett said, he feels they're a little bit more of also a media company. We have a huge portion that is media on our side as well, right? So we've created our own production company, and the enterprise approach, winning and staying global, will remain our #1 strategy for many years to come.
Winning is key, definitely key.
Have to win.
Have to win. Jackson, this one's directed towards you. What opportunities do you see to further integrate esports into your racing team?
Yeah, so I'm glad that Mike just went before me with that, because it reminded me of it was really cool last year in the 2019 NASCAR iRacing Championship race. It came down to the last couple of laps, and it was, our team, one of the most winning NASCAR teams in history, going up against G2 Esports. A team that sort of makes its bread in League of Legends, Valor, and other different types of games like that. And we were competing head to head to the final lap. And it showed you the value in having that brand spread across multiple entities, being able to take advantage of your resources, of where you can create efficiencies, but also to bring a fan base and to introduce a new fan base into different things. So I don't know exactly what's on the horizon for us as far as integrating maybe some more platforms, some more games. But I thought that was fascinating to see that being the battle taking place for the championship. Of course, we won, which made it a little more fun for me. But really just looking to, how can we integrate this? How can we utilize these assets to improve the fan experience, to improve our competition? Just looking to get creative with what's out there.
Very good. We got another question here from the audience. Brett, why don't we pass this one to you? It's an interesting one. How sustainable do you think esports really are?
I think it's here to stay. I think like any industry, you're going to see people who come in and think, hey, this is a gold rush. There's a quick buck to turn here, and they have no idea what they're doing, and they run a failed business. I mean, we see it time and time again. In the 20 years that Team Liquid has been around, there's been hundreds, and there's always somebody new. And every year there's a big new flashy thing that comes in, and people are like, oh, this is really exciting, and it tanks. But as Mike alluded to, this space has been around for 20, 30 years in some form or another, and there's been a lot of key learnings. And I think with the right management teams, the right goals, the right vision, there's real options for success and real pathways for success in esports. And whether or not that's on the team side and kind of creating team properties like we do, whether or not that's on the tournament platform side, the game development side, ancillary tools. I mean, you look at things like Discord, which is a massive platform, incredibly powerful, and it was started entirely for gamers, by gamers, to just be a better platform for gaming communication. And now it's huge and taking over, and people use it outside of gaming every day. So I really think it's truly sustainable. I think it really comes down to running clean, good businesses. And unfortunately, there's a lot of things that crash and burn, much like any other industry. I mean, you can look back to early era web, early era ads, digital advertising. There's plenty of companies that crashed out then too, and we're all talking to the internet today, so it worked out. Like, I really don't think it's going anywhere, and I think we'll just continue to see it grow. I mean, the fan base continues to grow. It's hitting kind of common market now. I mean, you saw this past weekend, just even more people jumping on board from Shaq with our announcement. There was also, I think, Lando Norris even commented on the fact that he went home immediately after winning and played a game of Call of Duty and won a Warzones match, and that was almost as good as winning the day. So that's, it's really out there in the public sphere now, and really excited about that, but definitely think it's here to stay.
Excellent. Yeah, I think I would agree. I think the rest of our panel would agree, and I believe our attendees would agree as well. So thank you guys so much for your contributions today. This was fantastic. We got a number of more questions. Unfortunately, we won't have time to get to them today, but we will follow up with you guys directly afterwards to answer your questions. Before I do the giveaway on the hats, we do want to make sure we get to a couple of things in the wrap up here. So I'll just hit on a couple of things here real quickly before we let you guys go. First off, kind of an overview of the sports ecosystem that Acronis plays in today. You guys will notice the hashtag there, CyberFit. We're using it on the majority of our media communications. But as you've heard from the panel today, modern sports, esports or otherwise, are driven by data. Every bit of data is important to win. Making sure that data is protected, secure, inaccessible to bad people is very important. Personally, I like the one on the left. I'm a Boston guy. I love the Red Sox. But I've now become fans of these other sports due to our technology partnerships with them. Didn't know much about racing before we started signing partnerships in Formula One and NASCAR. And now I'm a big fan. Didn't know much about esports before we started working with these partners as well. So fantastic opportunity for our customers and our partners to get engaged, to share their thoughts on this stuff. But we got a wide group of sports teams that are currently part of the Acronis ecosystems. And this isn't just a sponsorship, because these are actual technology partnerships. Every one of the partners you see here is leveraging the Acronis cyber protections and data protection platform to be able to protect their data, secure their data, and make their data accessible and usable in a very productive way. As far as where you can get more information, we do have a dedicated sports page. We are the leading provider of cyber protection globally, and as a result, we work with some of the top sports teams across the world. If there's a sport on here you're a fan of and we don't have it, please let me know. But I would be surprised if you find one that's not covered by Acronis today. So you can get more information at acronis.sport. And we've got another event coming up this Sunday. It's a virtual hospitality event with our friends from Roush Fenway Racing. You'll see here Ryan Newman will be captaining the number 6 car. If you want to register for that event, go to go.acronis.com/Roush. A lot of good stuff will be happening there on Sunday afternoon, including speaking sessions from Jack Roush, their founder, kind of a legend in the game. Ryan Newman, the Ford driver, and Scott Graves, their crew chief, will be joining us for a virtual hospitality event. Our events, we do a lot of events. They're a little bit different now with the new world, but you can get visibility to all of our events. The showcase event is our Cyber Summit that takes place October 19th to 21st. As of right now, that is scheduled to be a hybrid event with on-site attendees, properly social distanced, of course, but also augmented by a virtual event as well. We've got a great platform to be able to share a ton of content and great speakers. You can find information on all of our events at acronis.events. We've also got a specific page dedicated to motorsport tech. The first true sports partnership that we did was within Formula One. And in particular, the Williams team has been a great partner for us there as well. A lot of more information specific to motorsports at motorsports.tech. Additional resources, if you didn't learn enough today, we can provide more to you in terms of case studies provided here by Roush, Neo, Racing Point, Williams, Scuderia. All these teams are leveraging our technology today. You can read about how exactly they're doing that and how we're helping them be successful in these case studies. It's not just the sports teams that love us, the industry analysts do too. So IDC, Forrester, Frost & Sullivan, they're all rolled out some reports highlighting the capabilities of the Acronis platform. And it's not just talking about how we support sports teams, but really every size of business, from home user all the way up to very large enterprises. So a lot of useful information in there, as well as industry topics that can be further used for you guys to educate yourself on the space and on Acronis in general. And then more resources. Again, you probably see a pretty common theme here. We got a lot of blogs that we post on a pretty regular basis. You'll find those on social, on LinkedIn and Twitter, Facebook, etc. But you can find all of our resources. There's everything from white papers to case studies to IDC or analyst reports at acronis.com/resource center. Thank you very much. I'd like to really, again, extend a big thank you to our panelists today. I thought it was some fantastic content. A lot of interesting topics covered, and I would also invite you to register for either the in-person or the virtual event for the Acronis Global Cyber Summit happening this October in Miami. Thank you all so much for joining, and stay cyber fit. If you have the opportunity as well, please donate to our emergency relief fund. We're very passionate about our cyber foundation. Members from my team have gone to multiple locations across the world to build schools everywhere from Senegal to Nepal to Peru. Very passionate about this project and leaving the world in a better place, other than making sure everyone's data is protected. So thank you all very much for joining today. We really appreciate your time. And again, another thank you to our panelists. Really enjoyed the time today.